My whole life has been really a journey from my head to my heart. I got on a plane and came to America because something moved me inside, and I just thought, I just want to try this. I knew what I was capable of, I knew what my skill sets were, but I didn't know me.
My guest today is Elle Macpherson, an Australian-born supermodel and global icon, best known for gracing the cover of Sports Illustrated's swimsuit issue an amazing 5 times. But beyond the billion-dollar fashion houses that she helped build, Elle's story is one of resilience, it's one of entrepreneurship, and ultimately transformation. Not one to simply let others profit off of her image, Elle took control of her career in ways that others didn't or weren't at that time. Not only did she create her own apparel line long before that was actually a thing, she created her own agency to cut out the middlemen, and then she parlayed her celebrity into roles in television and film, and more recently founded Wellco, her line of beauty and wellness products.
The modeling itself, was pretty tough. I loved what I could receive from modeling, which was sort of freedom and financial independence and emotional independence. So I knew that if I wanted to be physically well, I had to do some examination around emotional and spiritual bodies, well-being.
It wasn't until she actually faced cancer and addiction that she truly began to understand the difference between, on the one hand, projecting wellness, and on the other hand, actually being well. A story that she elaborates upon beautifully in her recently released memoir, Elle, and which we discuss today in a candid, in-depth conversation that really centers on this idea of what happens when you're forced to rewrite your story.
It's very difficult to make a decision when you're in fear, and if you've got a lot of people telling you you're going to die, there's no greater fear than that. How do you find your truth, what resonates with you in your heart when there is so much noise outside?
It's delightful to finally meet you.
Finally.
I can't believe we kept missing each other. I mean, you've been to my house, you've spent all this time with my wife, and for whatever reason, I was trying to remember, I'm always out of town or something like that, and we kept missing each other.
Yeah, and you're in London, we kept, you were coming in and I was coming out.
And then when we were in Australia around this time last year.
That's so true, I forgot about that.
In Byron, and even I took Julie up to Mullumbimby.
Yeah.
And I think you had just been there, or you went there like the day after. We went to that place where they have the saunas and the cold plunges and stuff like that.
The bathhouse there, isn't that great?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's
very
kind of hidden.
Aussie.
We didn't even know. We were like, what's this? And we went in there and I was like, I think this is the place that Elle was just at the other day.
And the people that run it are fabulous. They're really cool, and I love the energy there.
It's old school though. It looks like it's been there for a long time.
Yeah,
it's
the
not
building.
Like a new, this is the hip thing. It looks like it's been there for decades.
They're into all that sort of natural wellness. I think that's a very Aussie thing.
Well, Mullumbimby has its own unique energy.
Yeah.
But I love that part of the world. I mean, Byron has become a very, kind of special place for me. And I've got all these friends there. And I just love all things Australia.
Including me.
That's true. Yes. And you're somebody who, even though we're just meeting today, I've known of you. When was the first Sports Illustrated cover?
I think that was in 1986. 85 or 86.
Yeah. So ever since then, you made that big splash.
And it was called The Big Splash.
Whoa,
I think that was the name of the cover. Yeah.
I didn't even know that. So you were on the cover 5 times? Is that still the record?
It is still the record. Yeah.
I want to get into all of that. But the other thing that kind of really struck me that I didn't realize about your life and career is just how entrepreneurial you've been, from the very beginning, always seizing these opportunities and moments to take greater control over the trajectory of your path, than most other people in your situation, did or could.
Yeah, it was more it wasn't so much control, but command, because I didn't love actually being in front of the camera, but I loved what modeling could bring. I loved what I could receive from modeling, which was sort of freedom and financial independence and emotional independence and travel and meeting new people. And so I felt that I needed to sort of expand as much as I could to keep creating new opportunities for myself, so I could keep doing it, so I could have the benefits from it, because the modeling itself was pretty, was pretty tough.
So it was always sort of a means to an end for you, for other things.
And an exploration. I wanted the experiences. And so I just, I did that Aussie thing, which was like, step outside of your comfort zones and give it a go. And so if opportunities came my way and they resonated with me, even if they didn't make logical sense, I would take steps towards it, and then the doors would open, and one thing led to another. And before I knew it, I'd sort of built a brand and had a platform, and then started producing things, and then started licensing, and then finally owning a business with Wellco.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of stuff in there, like set aside like the television and the film stuff. I also didn't realize like how many like sort of projects you did, in the kind of realm of Hollywood. But was the first kind of entrepreneurial venture when you decided to like do your own calendar?
Yeah.
That was the first instance of that.
That was.
Like realizing, well, Sports Illustrated is putting these things out. Like I can do this myself and control it.
Yeah, and I realized at the time that I was in more photographs in the calendar than a lot of the other girls. And so it was sort of heavily based on me anyway. And I just sort of thought, well, I'm not really being paid for this. Perhaps I can do it myself. But it was a fun project as well. Like I wanted to be able to choose the photographer and choose the location and apply what I'd learned with Sports Illustrated to my own project. And it was brilliant. I remember, I think it cost like maybe 60 grand. And I pulled it all together, and I found a producer, a printer and a distributor, and just did it. It was like a kid that, doesn't know any better when they're going down the mountain and they're skiing. They have no fear. Well, I had no fear at that time. I didn't think, well, what if it fails, or what if I can't get it out, or what if no one buys it? I just thought, okay, I'll give this a go.
Were you like the first person to try something like that at that time?
Maybe. I don't know if Christy Brinkley had done her own things. I mean, she was sort of the generation just before me. And she was already sort of stepping out of the kind of regular model mode. And she had her health and beauty books. She was doing other things. And so she may have done a calendar. I don't know.
Yeah. And then you had the lingerie company, right? That was like a licensing deal though, right? But that was also you kind of seizing control and saying, like, I can do something outside of the, kind of strictures of this modeling world and create kind of financial independence in a different way. I mean, now today with the influencer economy, like that just seems like an obvious thing. But at
back
that
then
time, it wasn't, right?
No. And it was really kind of a perfect sort of culmination of events, because this little New Zealand company was brilliant at making underwear. They came to me and said, will you be the face of our brand? I was looking for a project. I didn't know what, because I'd already kind of seen licensing in action as a child. I remember playing tennis. And do you remember John Newcombe? He was an Australian tennis player. And I remember getting a little tennis skirt, and it had his logo on it, which was his like wink face and his big moustache. And I was like, man, here's a tennis player and he's making clothes. Like, I think that's so genius that he's able to do two things. And so that sort of was in the back of my mind. And I had this concept that I had a platform through Sports Illustrated. How could I use that platform into creating a business that didn't require me going to the studio every day, like showing up as a model? How could I kind of find some sort of something, and at that time I thought it might have been swimsuits, that I could put my name on and have the swimsuits be the stars. So the sale of the swimsuits be my income rather than me just showing up at the studio. So making money while you sleep, really. And this New Zealand company had come to me and said, will you be the face of our brand? And I just said, why don't we do a licensing agreement where I'll help you design, because I love lingerie. I was living in Paris at the time. I can't find anything that fits. I have a particular type of thing that I want to do for myself. And if it sells, great. We all make money. If it doesn't sell, we don't, it's a wash.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my first truly entrepreneurial, I think, decision.
And it's a better one than swimsuits because swimsuits are seasonal, right?
Absolutely, and they're really hard.
The lingerie is a perennial seller.
I don't know
if
it is
pre-Victoria's Secret and all
exactly,
of that. Yeah.
And Skims, which is now doing so well. Yeah, and swimsuits are really hard to make because they salt. They have issues with salt, and it wasn't a good business model, that one.
It still feels like you should have done a swimwear line, though, because you were sort of so self-identified with, swimwear.
Yeah, but I was looking also to enhance women's femininity, and lingerie does that really well. It's sort of that inside beauty that has become a theme unwittingly throughout my career, is this sort of inner beauty and the power of that. And so lingerie was really for the women, under the clothes, how she felt under the clothes, how she felt about her, making her feel the most beautiful that she can. And it was sort of an intimate thing. That's why I called it Intimates, Elle Macpherson
and
Intimates.
Was that successful?
Very.
Yeah.
It was a 25-year license. It was one of the longest licenses ever. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was such a joy to kind of grow with the business, to start off with kind of some design ideas, and then it was marketing, and then it was advertising, and then it was, working with the CEOs, all the different CEOs. So I grew so much through it, apart from the longevity of the license and the, financial value of it, but personal growth.
Those experiences giving you confidence as a business person along the way, right? Like the fact that you later on, walked away from Ford Models and started your own agency so that you could control even further your career is has anybody done that? That was a wild move.
It's funny that you say that now. I didn't, at the time, I just sort of thought this agency situation isn't really working. I think I'll just take a manager. And that's what I did. I just sort of took one person that was going to help make realize the dreams that I had. And I couldn't do it alone. Cooperation and collaboration is really where it's at in business, and finding a team of people that have like-minded vision and working with people is the way to go. And I just felt sort of isolated in the agency, and they couldn't understand the licensing thing. They wanted a percentage of the license. And I was like, you can't take a percentage of that because, this is something that I pulled together myself. And so it was just one thing led to the other, but it was a pretty courageous move at the time.
The way that your book is laid out, it's not strictly a memoir. It's sort of like life lessons, told through stories and anecdotes throughout your life. Yeah. So on the entrepreneurial kind of side of things, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned through your, kind of journey with all of these businesses that you've created and overseen?
Yeah, good question. I would think the biggest one is give it a go. Have the courage to step towards anything that moves your heart. If any kind of inkling that you have of something that you'd like to do, put it into action, take a step towards it. And when you do, magical things happen, doors are open. But that, mindset of, let me explore this, rather than going, oh no, I don't know how to do it. So I think focusing on the why you're doing things as opposed to the how you're going to get it done is the first step. And that's always been very valuable for me in business.
You're a curious person, though, because on the one hand, you're somebody who has the audacity to chase big dreams and go for it and give it a go and all of that. But you're also very kind of open and frank about your insecurities and your fears and sensibilities around feeling out of place in this, very fast-paced world in which you are, kind of, this bright shining star with all this attention on you and kind of what was happening inside your mind at all those times. So it's not a case of you just being this super confident person who was fearless and just going for it.
Not at all. Confidence comes with experience, and trusting yourself. So it compounds over time. And in the beginning, I wasn't confident. I was courageous, perhaps. even getting on a plane when I was 18 and coming to America when I was supposed to be going to law school, which was so like, who does that? You know, law is so sort of stable and reliable. And, you know, I was going to marry the banker around the corner and I was going to have 2 kids and a white picket fence. And I got on a plane and I came to America because it just, something moved me inside. And I just thought, I just want to try this. So I was courageous, but not particularly confident. Confidence came as I started trusting that inner voice, listening to myself, listening to my heart's urges, and then taking those steps towards it and seeing the results. And then the results were, wow, I learned this and I can apply that to the next situation. So it comes over time.
So let's dig into the backstory a little bit. You grow up in North Sydney, right?
I grew up actually in Cronulla, Caringbah, which was
Cronulla.
south.
That's
and
south.
then I moved.
Your dad was, he was like president of the Cronulla Sharks, the rugby team.
Oh, wow. You know that. That's a,
yeah.
That's a good one.
Well, I have friends who are from Cronulla. So did you actually live in Cronulla?
How can you have friends from Cronulla?
Because that's where all the triathletes come from.
Oh, there you go.
In fact, one of them has the last name Macpherson.
Really?
Do you know Dan Macpherson?
No, I don't.
Actor from that part of the world.
No.
He's a friend of mine. Yeah.
I probably should know him.
Yeah, spelled the same way as yours. Spelled the same way as yours. I think. Oh no, it's MC. I think he's MC.
My dad's name was Peter Gow, and he was an entrepreneur, and we grew up in Caringbah, which is south, until I was 10, and then I moved north.
Then you moved north.
Yeah, when my mother remarried.
Yeah. No,
and my mother's remarried name is Macpherson.
I think there's like at least 2, maybe 3 Ironman world champions who all came up in Cronulla with the local triathlon team there. Chris McCormick, Greg Welch. Anyway, so I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar. Yeah.
So we have a connection.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I love the Australian culture, the beach culture, you know, the kind of Bondi sensibility. And you really exuded that. Like that was the kind of ethos of you know, the Sports Illustrated campaign. Like you were kind of representing that culture.
That sort of sporty, natural, kind of ballsy, strong Aussie thing, you know, which is no nonsense. And a good dose of sense of humor. I think that's really important, you know, sense of humor opens up the heart. And Aussies they have that lightness about them.
Yeah, for sure. So you're in your first year of law school. Is that true?
I didn't actually go.
Oh, that was the plan.
That was the plan.
And so how does the modeling thing kind of enter your world?
So I was going through high school. I think on the last year of high school, I was modeling a little bit, right, for pocket money. But I really wanted to go to law school. My stepfather was a lawyer, and I had worked really diligently academically. Having not been particularly good at school, I sort of developed the skills that I needed in order to get into university because I wanted to be taken seriously. And I also wanted to follow my stepfather's steps in some way. I was always a good arguer. And then I had a phone call from Ford at the time and asked me to go into the Ford Face of the 80s competition. And when that phone call came in, I had such a sense of excitement. And I thought, I'd love to do this. But my logical mind was like, that's not what smart girls choose to do. And so I said no. And as you read in the book, I had an immediate visceral physical reaction, which was I went and threw up. And that was the first sense that I had that I'd really gone against myself and chosen to do something that wasn't particularly in my best interest. And I vowed to myself at that point I'd never do that again. And then fortunately, thank you, universe, I had another opportunity. Agency called and said, you know, a few months later, we'd love you to come to New York. And I said yes, and the rest is history.
So you go to New York, what are you, like 18 or something like that at this time?
Yeah.
Had never been outside of Australia.
No, never taken a plane, long distance plane.
And your family kind of came to Los Angeles, right? And then you went to New York by yourself?
Yeah, we went on a ski trip to Vail and Aspen it was one of those package ski deals. And then we went to LA, we went to Disneyland, and then they went home and I took the red eye. into New York.
Right. And that's like 81, 82, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Uh-huh. And what happens when, the starry-eyed, young Elle arrives in Manhattan?
She freaks out. I was so scared when I first got to New York because, I'd heard stories about New York and it was dangerous. And
it was at that time.
Yeah, it was. And it was a very different New York to New York. It was sort of dirty and a lot of, when I say dirty, it was sort of run down to some extent.
Yeah.
And I went and I stayed with my agent there. She had like a little 1-bedroom apartment. I stayed with her and I hit the streets. I went on go-sees and I got jobs or didn't get jobs and met people and just sort of did my best to make ends meet. I didn't have any money at the time. And so I was sort of working to pay for life. And that's what I did. And
how long did that go on before the Sports Illustrated thing? So that was like 5 years.
2 years because let's say I arrived in 81 or 82. I had that year. The following year, I was asked to do Sports Illustrated, but it came out the following year.
Uh-huh.
So I was friends with Paulina Poroskova at the time, and she had already been on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Wait, you guys were roommates?
We did.
Yeah.
We roomed for a while. And, and I saw her, she would walk down the street and people would stop her. And she had this sort of aura and she had this recognition that opened doors. And I wanted what she had. I wanted that ease and flow that she had. I didn't have it within me, but I wanted what Sports Illustrated had given her to some extent.
There's something ineffable about that quality. Like there's something that some people just have, that you can aspire to have, but it's something that, you can't like fake, right? But that's very different from saying, okay, here's a goal that I have. Like I want that gig. I want to be on the cover of this magazine and kind of setting your intention upon that and like making it happen, like manifesting that.
Yeah, we manifest it through our imagination. And, having a vision, a clear vision. And I wanted to do Sports Illustrated. And I also wanted the cover, but I didn't get it.
You did get it, though. You did get it. And that was a major inflection point in your life, right?
It was.
You talk a little bit in the book about like your first sort of flirtation with fame in the wake of that, like when people started to because that was like, we're of the same age. And if you're of our age or you're Gen X, like you remember this time, like it was a big deal when the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue came out. It was like a sensational cultural moment, that we don't really experience so much anymore. And it also happened to coincide with a very specific time in fashion in which the supermodel thing was very real. Like these women were like iconic and just captured the fascination, of people all over the world.
Yeah, it was a very particular time that we don't have today. The supermodel era, I think, was really, and it's very different from today because the supermodel era, the more you were distanced from your public.
There was mystery.
Yeah.
These beautiful women, and there was a lot of intrigue around, who they were, but like you didn't know.
And we didn't have social media capturing everything. And today it's sort of the more close you are to your community, the more successful you are. But back then, the more distanced you were, the more successful you were, the more iconic you were, pedestal to some extent. And I think the models that have survived, and like Giselle, who you've had on your podcast, but the girls that have survived have been able to ride that wave through adaptability to the new era of being more accessible, being more open, being more relatable.
It is very different now. But when I reflect upon that time, you think of, there's Christy Turlington and Tatiana Patiz, like these sort of like, women that kind of stood above Naomi Campbell, right?
Yeah.
And when I think of that kind of cadre of supermodel at the time, I think of sophistication and Manhattan, and these are the women who are at the cool clubs and, like they're right at the epicenter of where everything's happening. But when I think of you, I think of you differently because you were sort of a more wholesome, kind of hometown girl. Yeah, like, I know that The Body, as Time Magazine's, dubbed you and all of that. But it seems to me that you were on the outside of that clique, like what they were at the fancy parties. I don't know what you were doing, but
I was married.
You were like, I don't associate you with that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, I was. I did feel like an outsider. I wasn't that interested in fashion. I was interested in brand building, I guess, to some extent, but I wasn't on the cover of Vogue. I don't think I've ever been on the cover of American Vogue. Yeah. I was just doing other things. And I was sort of saved from a lot of that because I was married young and I was busy co-creating with my then husband, Gilles Ben-Simon, who was a photographer at Elle magazine. And I would work with him on the magazine. I was also the model, but I would sit on the floor and do the layouts for the magazine with he and Régis Pagnès, who was the chief of Elle at the time. And I think I was just interested in other things, and I was protected somewhat because I had a secure relationship and I had a kind of day-to-day job. And I was building my own things. And
Gilles, he went on to become, he was like the creative director of Elle, right?
Right.
Elle and you had this, he was your partner, but also this collaborative relationship where you weren't just sort of being paid to be a model, like you were involved in the editorial process of, how you were being portrayed and how the magazine was being laid out. So that's another kind of like entrepreneurial aspect of your career that is unique in that world.
Yeah, it wasn't like I was thinking, oh, this is entrepreneurial. It was just that was the environment I was in, and I was enjoying it. And they gave me the freedom. I mean, how incredible to have that education with two brilliant creators that took me under their wing and said, hey, what do you think about this? How should we do this? Like, they valued my opinion. So it wasn't sort of like I had a vision, I'm just going to be entrepreneurial. I just found myself in situations that allowed me to explore whatever I was doing at the time to the best of my ability.
And you're all of like 24, 25 or something, right? Yeah. And I heard you say like, I don't really like fashion. Like you're not like a runway model, high fashion, sitting in the front row kind of person.
I've become that to some extent. Like I have more reverence for fashion today, but I was interested in personal style. So, and that's what Elle magazine.
What's the difference? What's the difference between fashion and personal style? So the difference between
fashion and personal style is Elle would always say, Elle magazine, which I'm not named after and isn't my magazine, because a lot of people say to me, is Elle magazine your magazine?
It so that you could be on the cover every month.
Elle's philosophy was to share with women or to encourage women or to show how to dress, not what to wear. How to inject your personal style into what you have, how to mix and match. So it would be like a Chanel jacket and a pair of sneakers. And that was really what Elle was about. Whereas other magazines were really telling you what to wear. Okay, you wear this look by Gucci or this. So Elle was really about bringing the individual into the equation as opposed to the clothes wearing the person. It was the person wearing the clothes with Elle. And that was a philosophy that I've sort of retained all my life, is how to inject your personal loves into how you express yourself in whatever you do.
That's something that also is difficult to teach, right? Like that's more of an intuition thing.
Yeah, you learn through experience as well. Yeah, and you bring your heart. And that is, your heart is your intuition.
Gonna get in my daily AG1. This is a habit I started maybe, 6 or 7 years ago. Tastes great, 75 vitamin and minerals packed into every scoop. And it's energizing, good for your body. Super simple, super easy, super convenient, particularly when I'm on the road, when I'm traveling, when I'm moving around a lot. I keep the travel packs everywhere I go, so they're always within arm's reach. And that way I know that I'm doing what's best for my body on the daily.
So if you're looking to establish a new healthy habit this year,
Try AG1 for yourself. It's the perfect way to prioritize your wellness. That's why I've been partnering with AG1 for so long. And right now, AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs in your first box. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/rich to start your new year on a healthier note. We're brought to you today by On Charge, which is this really cool company that makes a fantastic broad line of evidence-based holistic wellness products. They make everything from blue blocking glasses to red light therapy devices to EMF shielding products and tons more. Are you ready to elevate your wellness journey? Of course you are. So go to boncharge.com/richroll. Use code RICHROLL at checkout for 15% off their entire range of wellness tools.
The other thing that has changed quite a bit is the importance of all of these magazines. Like, you know, back in the day when you were really rocking your thing, like these Vogue, Elle, like, you know, I don't know all the names of them, but like, you know, they were super thick and like they were must-have items.
Full of advertising.
You know, you would buy it before you get on the plane, or like you would get it, you would subscribe and all the like. And they held a certain kind of importance in culture that now in this new media landscape, like it's very difficult to run like a financially viable magazine. And so they don't really hold the same kind of place in culture that they once did.
Yeah, and it was tangible. It was in your hands. You know, you had magazines and you could rip out a page and you'd stick it on your fridge and, you know, that was like your inspiration. But today, you know, everything is on the phone. And so, and it's transient. And fashion in itself is transient, but the mode of sharing it today is also transient because it's like, you know, it's an email or it's a flick on an Instagram post.
Right.
And so there was something sort of long-lasting in that paper quality.
Yeah. Did you have any interesting encounters with Anna Wintour? She seems like quite a character.
I mean, she's built an incredible business.
Yeah.
You know, she's very driven and purposeful in what she does, and she has really clear perspectives and visions on what she's trying to achieve, and she's done that very, very well.
You know, this sense of not being in the cool kids club and like this insecurity, which I think is, I said the same thing to Giselle because she was sharing like her insecurities and like just in terms of like the audience that's either watching or listening to this, like the idea that like someone like you would feel that insecurity inside of yourself with all the success and the glamour and the like can be kind of an inaccessible, like, you know, oh, please, like cry me a river kind of thing. So talk a little bit about that.
I think the insecurity just comes from inexperience. So when you're an 18-year-old girl trying to do a job that you've never done before and do it well, no matter what you're doing, or man, because I'm sure my children have the same sort of insecurities. Like even my son, he's like, but Mom, if I go and work at a PE fund, I have no experience and I'm going to be like the dumbest one there. And, you know, I don't want to look like I'm stupid and I have a great education. So it's that inexperience that can feel like we are not good enough. And in fact, over time, as you practice more, whatever your chosen vocation is, you become better at it and you start to find your way around it. And I think in the beginning, what happened was I was just trying to do a really, really good job doing something that I'd never done before. And I was being paid very well to do it. Because there is a skill in modeling. You know, there is, you know, it's not just you show up and you look good, but you work with a team and you have to understand the light and you have to understand timing and you have to, there's so much more. It's a collaborative effort and you get better at it as time goes on.
You share the lessons that you learned around work ethic, like early on in your career. And what comes across very clearly is like your dedication to like, oh, this is, you know, this is my profession. If I want to excel, I have to show up on, you know, I have to do all these things and I have to like attack it like you would any, you know, kind of audacious goal that you have for yourself. And that's another Like there are a lot of similarities in your kind of story and trajectory with Giselle, because that came across with her as well. Like she was like, she was not letting any opportunity, fall by the wayside. Yeah. Like she was coming from, a foreign land, didn't know anyone, and was like, I'm going to make this work. And the way I'm going to make it work is I'm going to outwork everybody.
Yeah, give 1,000%. And what Giselle has done is she's retained her heart in everything that she's done as well. She did it her way. She did it, she brought her uniqueness into whatever she was doing. And I think that that's super important in any business, is to bring your uniqueness. So often we want to be like somebody else. I want to be like that guy over there or that girl over there. They did this, so I can do that. But really the magic happens when you bring your vibrance into whatever you're doing and bring it 1,000%, really commit to it.
How did you, I know you were married, but like, how did you avoid kind of falling into the sort of fast-paced, after-party lifestyle of the whole, kind of...
Well, I didn't.
Well, we're going to get into your sobriety story, but it's pretty tame. It's pretty tame. Yeah.
The first 10 years, so, in my 20s, I was married and I was just working. And so, when other girls were going out to parties, I was going home to my husband and doing the layouts for Elle magazine or traveling to our next location. So I was saved a lot of that early exploration in my 20s. When I got divorced or separated in my 30s, that's where everything I started to explore a little more.
Were you still in New York at that time?
Yeah, New York and LA.
Yeah. What were the years that you lived in New York?
So I moved in 81, 82. I was between New York and Paris for those 10 years. And then I got my own apartment in New York in the 90s.
I was there from like 89 to 94.
It's a pretty groovy time to be there.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, there was a lot happening. Wall Street was...
Well, it was sort of the tail end of the dodgy, kind of era. But it was...
That's such an Aussie word, dodgy.
Maybe I'm spending too much time in Australia. But it was before, like, everything became kind of whitewashed and over-gentrified. Like, Soho was still cool, and there were still kind of, like, vacant buildings, and young people could live in lofts in Soho, for almost no money. Tribeca wasn't even a thing yet.
Yeah, meatpacking district. I lived uptown. I had that. I'm gonna live on Madison Avenue, where all the girls live downtown. But I was already sort of moved uptown, investing in art, getting great furniture, living a sort of more European life during that time. And I'd been successful in my career for those 10 years. So I had disposable income. I didn't have children. And I was really interested in exploring life as a grown-up.
That's so responsible, because I just found it wildly over-tempting, and just found myself in all kinds of compromised situations.
I probably did a fair dose of that too, though, to be fair, along the way.
Where were like the bars and the clubs that you were going to?
I would go, so in the 80s, I was going to sort of Palladium and the Roxy, and I think I was at the tail end of Studio 54, maybe not.
Yeah, it was dwindling.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the early 80s, it was still kind of a thing. But
still there, but then Palladium came in pretty quickly because it was the same guys that did it. So Lighthouse.
The big dance clubs.
They were fun times because I would work during the day, and then at night I'd sleep for a few hours, and then I'd get up and go out. And that was sort of, I was thinking, okay, well, I have 8 hours sleep. I sleep sort of 4 hours before going out and 3 hours when I get back or whatever.
And this was the cocaine era.
It was. Silence.
Tell me more.
Listen, I think everybody was sort of, experimenting and exploring. And we didn't know a lot about drugs then. I mean, I remember people saying, oh, you can do cocaine because it's not addictive.
Right.
And I was always paranoid of trying any drugs because I didn't like being out of control. And I didn't want to lose what I had worked so hard to gain in life. And I'd sort of heard stories about people that do cocaine and heroin, and they just fall off the tracks and they lose their looks and they can't work anymore, and they're sitting in the corner scratching themselves. And so I just thought, I can't go there. But, over time, I guess I checked things out for a while.
You got to. A little
Why
bit,
not?
right? You got to give it a go.
Give it a go.
When I think of like that era and supermodels, et cetera, it was also the kind of, wafy, heroin chic kind of look that was very in at the time.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of pressure on the models to always be like ridiculously thin. And so they would just smoke cigarettes all day and not eat and, have, bulimia, et cetera. But you were kind of the healthy beach girl or something. Was there pressure on you to kind of fit that mold, or were you always like, okay, I'm this person and this is my thing?
Well, I couldn't fit that mold because I'm 6'4" in heels, 6 foot, and I had these broad shoulders and I was athletic. And so, it didn't matter how much I would want to, I wasn't that girl. I just couldn't be that girl. And at the moment that I sort of realized that my strengths were in this sort of Amazonian fitness and health and kind of vibrancy, then I leaned into that because that's where my work was and that's where my creation stream was. And so even if I'd wanted to be all those things, I couldn't physically be it.
Right. But you have all these experiences in New York and Paris, and you're young, and you're keeping it together, though. So, your kind of sobriety journey is very different. Like, it doesn't really creep up onto you until much, much later. So, maybe kind of walk us up to where it starts to become problematic.
It's hard to kind of discern exactly where, but I know that in the 90s, see, I don't even know. It's so far. I'm 21 years sober. What's your?
I had a little lapse a while ago, so it hasn't been contiguous. But I went to rehab. I went to rehab in '98, and I had a little lapse about 10 years in.
Yeah, so I went to rehab in 2003 after the birth of my second son.
Did you go to Sierra Tucson?
No, I went to the Meadows.
Oh, the Meadows.
I loved it.
The Meadows is great.
I chose the Meadows because it had a balance between physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. And that's what I was looking for. And so, whilst I probably could have done another 10 years drinking because that was my drug of choice, emotionally and spiritually, I felt barren. And that's why I chose to go to rehab more than it was like, oh man, I'm drinking too much. It was like, I don't feel connected. I don't feel connected to myself. I don't feel connected to life. I don't feel connected to God or spirit or the universe. I don't feel connected to nature. And I really wanted to find out why I felt disconnected, which is why I drank, because I felt disconnected. That's a very painful place to be in. And how I could reconnect to myself, really. And so the Meadows offered me that opportunity because they focus so much on that balance of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
Yeah, the Meadows, it's not a strictly substance addiction kind of treatment center.
No.
It's for all kinds of, mental health issues.
Or, an addiction can be an addiction to emotions, drama, pain, fear. It's not just substances.
When you think back to when it was starting to become problematic, like what have you learned about yourself that led to that kind of escalation?
I go back to the disconnection. I feel that it was a coping mechanism. It was like, okay, how do I numb the fear that I'm feeling because the fear is debilitating, or the anxiety, or the just not knowing? And alcohol did a really good job of that for a while until it didn't. And I think I was trying to be something I wasn't. I was married by that time. Well, not married. I was with the father of my children. I had 2 young children. I'd moved to London. I was a corporate wife. I'd let go of a lot of the work that I had been doing where I was able to express myself in that area. And I just felt overwhelmed with the life that I was living, and I felt like I didn't know myself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And drinking helped with all the social things we had. We were building a big charity. He had a business. I had a high profile. So we were constantly social. And that was sort of my way of getting through it until I realized I was living a life that I didn't want to live anymore, and I needed help. And that's why I went to the Meadows.
If somebody doesn't know your story, they would probably presume that, this problem originates in kind of the party lifestyle of being a model at a very high level. But you were living like a, kind of a high society,
Chick.
like
I was.
Philanthropy and
and
wealth
travel.
and husband and all this sort of stuff. And it's almost like, a mommy's little helper situation more than it is like, oh, I was at Studio 54. Like you were just sort of drinking at night after you put your kids to bed and like maybe having a little bit too much, but not getting out in the car and driving or creating all kinds of chaos.
No.
Like it was a very quiet, struggle, little war that you were waging with yourself.
Which can be the most detrimental at times.
Yeah. So I think when I think of your kind of drunk-a-log and your sobriety story, on the one hand, it's like, well, there's nothing really dramatic about this. It's like the most kind of like middle of the road situation ever. Like,
Nothing
I just
juicy.
had some vodka before I went to bed every night. And sometimes I wouldn't remember things. Like, like what's the big fucking deal, right? This is
so
like
true.
millions of people. But I think that's what makes it actually, really relatable and perhaps even more powerful because alcoholism, is a self-diagnosed disease, as you and I both know. And, it takes what it takes to get sober. And we all have our different kind of pain thresholds.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a lot of people out there who are, quietly struggling with an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, but it never gets so out of control. So it's easy to just kind of keep doing it. And your life either stays the same at best or it slowly degrades. But there isn't that like moment of absolute chaos that like shocks you into reality and snaps you out of your denial to go to Meadows or someplace like that or go to an AA meeting. And so I think the honesty and the vulnerability that you show in telling your story, it takes you as somebody who is kind of fundamentally like, on a surface level, like unrelatable to an average person. Very relatable because I think, that your story, the facts of our experience are different, but, we can see ourselves in, other people's journeys. And I think that's a story that I think a lot of people can probably relate to.
And that was the purpose of writing this book. It wasn't to tell my life story like, okay, now I'm 60, it's a good time to write all the brilliant things I've done. It was a moment of recognition, of realization back in 2020, and it's so interesting, 2020 hindsight vision was that I'd had these experiences in life and that they were all there for a purpose. They were all meaningful. They were all valuable. And when I started to write, I was seeing that there was a thread through my stories that were common to everybody. Universal life lessons that I had been learning. And that's what I wanted to do, was to write, to share them. And there are so many people that, reach out to me and say, I thought that there would be nothing in common with us. And it's like what we say in AA, it's not the stories, it's the feelings that you have as you navigate your life circumstances that we connect with. And people are connecting with the feelings, with the questions I would have or the solutions that I found. That's what they're connecting with, not necessarily the actual circumstances themselves.
Yeah. So what was the moment where you thought like, all right, I can't do this anymore?
Well, I had, my son had just been born, Sai, in 2003. And my therapist had said to me at the time, Elle, we're never going to get to the depths of what we're trying to uncover here in your spiritual and emotional well-being while you're drinking, because it's like a handbrake to getting to that deeper essence of self. And she said, I think you should go to rehab. And I was like, I don't need to go to rehab. If anyone needs to go to rehab, they need to go to rehab. You know, it's not me. I'm not the problem. And she said, no, I really do think that you need to, for us to go deeper, and you want a deeper spiritual connection in life, we can't do it as you are now. And I said to her, well, I'll just stop drinking. She said, oh, okay, just stop drinking. And I said, anyway, I'm going to Ibiza for 3 months and I just won't drink. And she said, oh, okay, well, let's see how that goes. So I would call her every Tuesday and Thursday, which were my, days. And I would say, see, I'm not drinking. It's cool. I'm not drinking. And I did that for about 6 weeks. And then one day everybody went out and I had that feeling of I'm being left out. And I felt vulnerable and I felt whatever I felt at that time. And then I realized the only thing that was going to take that away was a drink. And so it was that realization that I couldn't go the 3 months without drinking, without help. And I just left the next day. I smashed open a bottle of vodka, drank it, and then like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, you break the bottle of vodka, but you make sure that you pour yourself, you get what you need out of it, right? Even if there's shards of glass in it.
Yeah, which there was.
Yeah. So that's a good indication that maybe something's not totally okay.
But it wasn't so much the drinking of the vodka, it was that I couldn't not drink. It didn't matter what, it didn't matter. The shards of glass are always, it makes great clickbait and things like that. People go, oh, she's really desperate because she drank it with the glass in there. It was more the realization that my therapist was right. I couldn't not drink for that period of time when triggered with an emotional response,
So you're in the Meadows for like 6 weeks, right?
Yeah, I actually stayed longer.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I asked to stay longer. Because Meadows for me was a safe ground.
I kind of loved it.
Art class.
I didn't have art class.
I did art class, and
you're like, all we do is sit around and talk about our stuff.
Yeah, and we did. I mean, the Meadows was great because it was very holistic. So we had acupuncture, and we had group therapy, and we had one-on-one therapy and art class, and so it was a safe space for me to just rest my parasympathetic nervous system and to dedicate some time with very skilled practitioners to go deeper into understanding myself. But I was 40. I mean, to be 40 and think, I don't know myself at all. I thought I did. I knew what I knew what I was capable of. I knew what my skill sets were, but I didn't know me. And just before that, I had done Hoffman. Have you done Hoffman?
No, but it keeps coming up.
Oh, man,
lots
it's
of people have,
so good.
Lots of people have sat in that chair and told me how transformative.
So I did Hoffman, then the Meadows. And then I think I went back and did, more work at the Meadows.
So you were committed to your kind of, emotional, mental health prior to getting sober. Usually it's the other way around. Like you got to get sober first before you would even entertain like therapy or Hoffman or anything like that.
I'd understood that there was a connection between emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being, or emotional and spiritual well-being, and how that affected the body. So I knew that if I wanted to be physically well, I had to do some examination around emotional and spiritual bodies, well-being.
When you say like you didn't know yourself, like what does that mean? Like know thyself is, a question of infinite possibilities. And it is the ultimate question, right?
It really is.
On this path, you devote your entire life to try to answering that. And it's, it gets more expansive at every kind of level. But the dawning realization, like, oh, I don't really know myself, even after Hoffman and then being at Meadows and trying to solve that puzzle for yourself. For somebody who's never really kind of entertained that or has never occurred to them to like look inward and answer that question for themselves, like how do you describe that?
It's such a big question, like who am I? And I think for me, it has been, my whole life has been really a journey from my head to my heart. And when I say know yourself, it is to have a connection, to have a relationship with your heart, not just your head. And that will express itself in a million different ways, at every circumstance or situation that we approach. And it'll be different for me as it is for you, but it's to trust, to trust your heart, to take time, to get quiet many times in the day before doing anything major, at least. And just feel what resonates with you. It's not like a definition of this is who I am. It's a beingness of a moment-to-moment practice of responding to life through your heart. And when you do that continually, you start to have a much clearer perspective on who you truly are or how you can be in every circumstance, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What is the modality of your practice? Meditation?
My day is like a walking meditation. But in the beginning, it started quite strict. So I would have guided meditations. I have a spiritual mentor. His name is Paul, and I talk about him in the book.
Yeah.
Paul
I have questions about him in that
book. I would love for you guys to meet by the phone or not. His
Atoms to Angels?
Atoms to Angels was the book that changed my life that I read from him. In the beginning, I would do guided meditations and then lots of different types, for whatever I was chasing at that time. And then it moved into more still meditations, but still very structured. So, time in the morning, time in the evening. And then I did, I did the TM thing for a while, tried that.
You got the mantra.
Yeah, I got my mantra. And today it's really just like, it is a walking meditation, which is that sense of always coming from a heart space, that quiet heart space. Even now, like when I'm really nervous talking with you, it's just to take a deep breath and just to be in my heart.
So Paul Darrell Walsh in this book, tell me all about this.
So he wrote a book called From Atoms to Angels. And I had just gotten sober, I think. And I was kind of navigating that. Like, how do I be in my life as this sober woman living in a very unsober world? And how do I sort of bring that into my everyday life? I don't really know how to do it, but I'll go to AA and I'll just put one step in front of the other. But I was looking for a deepening understanding of my spiritual or of a spiritual center in my life. And as you know, AA is a spiritual program.
Sure.
But I was looking for a deepening in that. So I go away to the Bahamas and I find this book on the shelf of this place that I'm in. And the woman that was running the house said to me, "Oh, I know those guys that wrote that book." And I said, I read the book and I said, I want to meet with them. And so in my kind of arrogance, I said, "Where are they? I'm going to find them." And they were living in India at the moment. And I said to them, I want to do a retreat. I want to do like a week's retreat. I've just gotten sober and I want to kind of solidify this in my life. And I'd never met them before. And I did a whole sort of week or 10-day retreat with them. And we did everything, from talking about the meaning of ascension, which I didn't understand at the time and still is a very kind of nefarious subject for a lot of people. And the concept that life happens through you, for you, not to you. So moving out of victim consciousness, moving into your own empowerment, and that we are the ultimate creators. I mean, these were all things that I had never heard of, or, that we are just an energy source, and how do we direct that energy source? We are all capable, all powerful. And so there were very new concepts for me, because for me, spirituality was about God and religion. Mm-hmm. And, they came and we worked together and we did, we looked at a lot of different areas from, astrology to numerology to, working with crystals to Reiki. And it was fun and inspiring and enlightening and empowering and eye-opening. And it was the beginning of my kind of journey into realizing that we were not just sort of victims of our lives, just having to deal with whatever came up for us.
And what was it specifically in this book, like Atoms to Angels, that like leapt off the page or spoke to you? Because there's lots of books in this sort of genre, right?
Yeah.
But you make a very conscious, effort or point to like, highlight like this book as being transformational for you.
As I said, I think it was that concept of life happens through you, for you, and that we are energetic beings. And I don't know if there was one specific thing that was said. It was a feeling I had when I read the book. It was just that I need to know more. I want more of what I'm feeling when I read this book. I want to understand. I want that inspiration in my life and that strength of being and lack of fear.
Yeah. Not as a replacement to AA, but as a
conjunction.
Yeah, a supplement. Yeah. I think there's this sort of notion in Alcoholics Anonymous or within the sobriety community, like, oh, you're an AA, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Like things that are outside of that are kind of a distraction from the step work and service, et cetera. And my experience has been quite different. Like I love AA, it saved my life. It continues to save my life. I'm very devoted to that community. And I think it's profound.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't continue to explore, spiritual growth in other areas that
if it moves you. Yeah, if it moves you. Sometimes it's just keeping it as simple as possible. With the steps in AA is where people find their groove. I still go to AA and I still believe that it's one of the best programs for anybody, even if you're not struggling with, alcoholism, but you might be struggling with other things in your life. I think it's such a brilliant roadmap for life.
The tools are sort of equally applicable. You don't have to be suffering from an addiction to benefit from like going through the steps.
Absolutely. Or even, Al-Anon or any of the other affiliated programs.
So Squarespace has been a long-time partner of the show, and what I love about it is it just demystifies everything about what's required to make a website. You don't need to be a designer. You don't need to know how to code. Everything is right at your fingertips. They make it super simple, and they've got these unbelievably beautiful templates to choose from that are oriented around whatever your needs may be. Whether you need a simple landing page or a full-on online shop, Snap, Crackle, Pop, Squarespace has the tools you need to launch your business, including e-commerce templates and inventory management. So make that website. You got it. Click the link in the description below for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use offer code RICHROLL to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. We're brought to you today by ROKA. Glasses are not something you normally think about as a piece of performance gear, which, when you think about it, is kind of insane because you can't perform at your best if you can't see. Well, the geniuses at ROKA basically rebuilt eyewear from the ground up. No matter how active you are or how much you sweat, these things never slip or fall off your face. They're super durable, they look awesome, and they've got tons of super classy modern styles to choose from. I've been rocking ROKAs for about 4 years at this point. I love them. I'm a big fan of the Hamilton style in gloss black. That's this frame right here, as well as clear, or I guess they call them vintage on the website. And if you want to try them out for yourself, you can do that right now and unlock 20% off your order with the code RICHROLL at ROKA.com. Or you can click the link in the description below. Okay, back to the show.
As somebody who's lived all over the world and travels constantly, where have you found like the best AA communities?
Oh, that's a goodie. Oz.
Oh,
you know, like there's a meeting on Bondi Beach, which is really cool and sort of authentic and simple.
The one
and
in the, what is it
in
called?
The pavilion.
The pavilion.
Yeah. I love that one. But, there are great meetings everywhere. And I think it depends on where you're at. It's not the meeting itself. It's where you're at in your, I remember when I was first, 3 months sober, I was in Yorkshire in England. Big drinking, shooting party with the father of my children, typical English sort of, wake up, have a bull shot, have at 11 o'clock, then there's 11 season.
Like tweed and hounds
and cold
and like
weather.
Land Rovers.
and having to keep warm. And I remember driving for about an hour and a half to go to a meeting at 7 o'clock at night when I was supposed to be at dinner with everybody. And I got there and it was the most down and out, meeting, and it saved my life. It was just so rich and raw and needed. And, the fact that I'd made the effort to do it, it gave me confidence with myself, with my own resolve and discipline. Making the effort to go was as much as the meeting itself. So it's not really about the meeting per se. It's about the willingness to check it out wherever you are.
Do you know John Pearson?
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Because he's from Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Like when you said Yorkshire.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
He lives here now. He was sort of the male supermodel.
Yes, somebody spoke to me about him just recently.
He's the best. He's such a great guy. He's been on the podcast. You would know him from the George Michael video with all the models.
Right.
The Faith video.
Yeah, that was such a great video, wasn't it? I wish I did that.
Yeah. Anyway, you talk about doing your first 4-step inventory. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, I had this feeling that if I didn't do it perfectly, I was not going to stay sober. Because there's always this, you have to do the 4th step and the 5th step, and if you don't do that, And so I didn't even know where to begin. And I was one of those kids at school that would start a new notebook in class for the new year. And if my writing wasn't perfect, I'd rip out the page and do it again because I wanted it to be perfect. And that was the same for my 4th step. I wanted it to be perfectly laid out, every single thing I could think of. And I worked on it for months and months and months, trying to get this sort of spreadsheet of inventory. It was very cathartic, at the very least, but of course it wasn't necessary. And that's a powerful step. It's a hard one.
That's the step where everyone sort of gets hung up. And for people that don't know, the 4th step in the 12 steps is where you kind of take inventory of your past behaviors. And it's recommended that it's something you do fearlessly and thoroughly.
Yes.
And you basically tabulate all of your resentments and your fears. And you have to do a sexual inventory where you were, kind of misbehaving sexually. It's sort of a gut-wrenching thing.
Yeah.
You have to go back into your past and revisit,
and
all of
sometimes
these
we don't even
experiences
know.
That, either you can't remember. And I just remember when I did my first, I was I couldn't think of anyone that I didn't resent. So I literally listed out every single person I'd ever met my whole life.
That's a very common thing in especially when you're newly sober, because, again, it's this thought of I'm a victim of my life. And so it wasn't really my fault, it was their fault. And if they didn't do that to me, then I wouldn't be, So it's trying to discern what's truly going on, where are the character traits that we want to heal, that we want to rebalance without taking the blame for everything, but just to have a stock and understanding of it.
Yeah, the point of it isn't simply to have this cathartic experience where you put it all on paper, but to identify your part in all of these, emotional experiences. And then when you have it all out, you can see these patterns emerge. Every time this happens, this is how I behave, et cetera. So when you did that for the first time, what were the revelations around the character defects that, were contributing to your...
Oh, you're testing my memory. Well, what are the main... There's 7 deadly sins, really, that we look through. But mine, I think, was probably fear. Okay, so reacting out of fear. And so assuming the worst and responding to the worst of whatever the situation was. I think that was my main thing was fear.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah. And that's an adult child of an alcoholic type of symptom. You have to look around corners as a child who was living in a sort of chaotic life. And if I could anticipate the worst thing that can happen, then I'll be able to map out what I can do to mitigate it or to control it or to deal with it. And it was a survival mechanism as a child. And then often we take that on as an adult and we continue to catastrophize or continue to think of the worst case scenario to test to see if we can deal with it. And then we create new neuron pathways and we start to live that way. And then we manifest what we imagine.
It's rather astonishing the extent to which our perception of our own consciousness dictates life outcomes. And I think, and I'm speaking for myself, like the vast majority of people, we spend the vast majority of our time thinking about something that happened in the past and fantasizing about something that hasn't happened yet.
For sure.
And we're very rarely actually
in the present.
In the only thing that actually exists, which is the present moment. And it doesn't matter how many times I say that or remind myself of that, it remains such a difficult thing to continue to anchor yourself in the present and to understand like all of that, all of those mental strategies were designed to protect us and keep us alive.
Right.
And yet, for the most part, kind of don't serve us in an optimal way.
Absolutely. How we are in the present dictates the future. So it's to be putting your energy into what you love, to what really resonates with you in the here and now. Life flows where your energy goes. And so if we're constantly in this moment of appreciation, of gratitude, of wonder, of curiosity, of beingness in this moment, that is the life that we will have, which is very fulfilling and enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. I think there's something specific about America that creates an even greater degree of difficulty with what you just shared, because there's such an emphasis in this culture around like individual liberty, and it's like manifest destiny and the American dream, and it's up to me and I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And so the focus is really on the individual, on the self, which kind of overemphasizes like or overly celebrates like the ego.
Yes.
And so it's very difficult to kind of, maybe more difficult here than in other cultures, to kind of disabuse yourself of that idea of the self, which is, basically an illusion if you believe in non-dualism, as I do. But to kind of really own or understand that all these ideas that you have about who you are pure illusion is a very difficult leap.
It's a tough one to communicate, to teach, and to embody, and that is really my journey. That's the book's journey, and life is that journey of recognizing the value of connection to all things, and not the individuality of me, myself, I, as being the only facilitator of the future or of my life. It's not just me, it's a co-creation, a collaboration, a co-creation between life experiences, the people that you have around, nature, energy source. And that's a hard one for people to kind of understand in their heads. They have to live it, and they live it through experience.
What are some of the other guides or books or individuals who have kind of helped shape your spiritual perspective and growth?
The biggest shaping of my spiritual perspective has been my own experience. And I don't mean it in a self-centered way, like I'm my own spiritual guru in any way, but I have learned more through my life experiences than reading other people's life experiences or philosophers' visions on things, because we've both been around people that can talk the talk, but can't walk the walk themselves, live it themselves. I remember reading Ram Dass's Be Here, Be Now. Be Here, Be Now, is that the one?
Be Here Now.
Yeah, Be Here Now. And that being like, so it sounded great and it sounded like what I wanted, but I didn't know how to live that at that moment. I didn't truly know what it meant. Osho, it was like it resonated with me. It touched my heart. It was like, yeah. But living that spiritual way of being or philosophy is a completely different thing from just reading it and thinking that sounds nice. And in even Paul's book, it is so much more meaningful. I'm living that more today than when I first read it, when it really changed my world.
Mm-hmm.
And so life is experiential. It is the experience that we have in the moments that we have, and not the philosophies that we try to adopt.
There is something about being our age where you do become more self-reflective and kind of open to these ideas, and you've accumulated enough life experience where suddenly they have a resonance. Like if I read Be Here Now today, I'm going to have a very different experience with that book than I would have, when I first read it when I was like 31 or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you've accumulated enough life where it has a grit to it that it doesn't when you haven't had that many experiences. So when you speak to younger people, or you're trying to kind of, you have two sons, like how do you spare them some of the pain, that you've experienced, or how do you connect those lessons to, somebody who hasn't, kind of lived as much life as you have, to help them kind of see it more clearly sooner?
That's a beautiful
question. Or can you
question.
not? Like, I think, you have to live your life. I think everybody has to have their experiences and earn
and learn
that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I think our kids learn through observation. So they watch. You can say all you want, but really they will watch how you are in your life. In my case, with my kids, it's an ongoing thing where I don't give them books to read, except mine.
Oh, no. You've never said read this book. Have they read your book? Of course they have,
read
right?
my book and were moved by it. I think they but not by the stories that I tell about my life, or not only by the stories I tell about my life that they may not have known, but because I have so carefully curated and consciously chosen the language, the words, they were able to read it and join the dots of things that I've been saying in conversation. But when it's on a page like that, they can actually join the dots. Oh, that's what she means when she said this and this and this. Or that's why she does things this way. I understand now. Mm-hmm. So I think for them, it was a greater insight into me, but more importantly, a greater insight into themselves. And that was my purpose of the book, is that when people read it, they have a greater insight or a greater understanding or a greater acknowledgement of them, not so much me. And with the boys, I take the time to point out when I see them. So, for example, with Sai, my youngest, he's extremely intelligent, academically brilliant in many ways, and he relies heavily on his academia. He's also very intuitive. And in a world where having an intuition is kind of seen as not that valuable, especially in a young man, you're bright, you're this, you're a go-getter. He's incredibly intuitive. And I talk to him about the battle that he has between his logical mind, his common sense, and his inner sense, and that they're both valuable. And to trust his inner sense, because that will guide him in his decision-making, and his brilliant brain will help him execute what his heart desires. And so when those opportunities come up, I talk to them about that. But it's not like I hand them, a book and say, read this. I think it'll be really helpful.
Yeah. That's a dilemma. If you're a bright, young, intellectual mind, you will be rewarded and validated for that.
Yeah.
And the more that happens, the more the heart-mind gets muted, right? And deprioritized. I mean, I've experienced this, and I'm in a process of trying to, reconnect with my intuition and my heart's song.
Because we all have it.
Yeah. And, it's sort of a masculine thing too, I think. It's like, it's a feminine energy, but it has its own wisdom, and that wisdom is valuable. And I would fully admit that I've been quick to like kind of repress it or keep it at bay to my own peril.
Because ultimately what we're here to do is to embody the both divine masculine and divine feminine, which is heart and head, not just one or the other. And traditionally speaking, it was always like the masculine energy was all about the head and the feminine energy was all about the heart. But today, I think we are combining both the masculine and the feminine in the individual. And that is a big thing in relationships. There has been times where we looked for a relationship where there was a you complete me type of scenario, the yin yang, I'm this and you're that, and together we make this. But today, I think we're really looking at balancing that masculine and feminine within each of us individually, women and men, and teaching young men, because I have 2 boys, the value of that is where I am their wise guide, where I see myself as their wise guide. But it can't be heavy-handed, and you can't preach, and they don't listen to me half the time anyway. So.
No, I get it.
So it's a nice idea.
But you've been in a few relationships, right?
I have long-term relationships. I've had a series of very long.
You've had an interesting, journey with, partnerships over the years, and you seem to have a really beautiful, healthy one now with Doyle.
Yeah.
But what have you learned through all of those experiences about relationships that you think is worthy of sharing?
Don't fall in love with someone's potential. Because I was really good at that.
Yeah.
I was like, I can see it.
Are you a fixer?
A box ticker.
Box ticker?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I think I would look at a relationship, and I have done this, and going, well, it looks good on paper. It's like, okay, kids the same age, tick, loves his children, tick, successful in business, tick, it's sort of those kind of ideas that we have about who we think would be great for us in a relationship, and they're all the doing things. They're not necessarily the being things. So it looks great, and then there's no resonance. And so I think that sometimes we go through attraction, it's really about connection more than attraction. And I was looking at, what was attractive. And I don't mean just physically. I mean from the exterior, what was I attracted to, instead of where was my true connection. And that's what I have in my relationship today, which is attraction and connection. But the entry point into the relationship was connection. Heart connection, spirit connection, soul connection.
Yeah.
And resonance, frequency, the frequency that we both function in our daily life. You attract the frequency of who you are. And I think it's often about, be the love you want to receive. Be that energy and you will receive it.
Right. It's not about chasing what you want. It's about becoming the person who would attract that person.
Exactly.
You have to be the person that person would want to be with.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
That's really the ultimate kind of Jedi move.
And we were talking about this the other day, is that, we always say I fell in love with this person. And in fact, I think we rise in love because love is such a high frequency, experience. But I feel that we rise in love with the person that we are when we are with that person. So you rise in love with yourself, and they're the witness of it.
In the purest sense, but all relationships begin with both parties, projecting an idealized version of that person onto them. They're not actually seeing you, they're seeing kind of what they want to see.
Yeah, but if I love somebody and I'm with somebody and I'm thinking, for example, with Doyle, it wasn't so much I was attracted and connected to him, but I loved who I was when I was with him. Oh, I still love who I am when I'm with him. It's I'm my best version of myself when I'm in this relationship. And so it's like falling in love with yourself in many ways.
Do you have a relationship with regret? What does regret look like to you? I mean, in AA, it's sort of we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it.
Yeah.
But regret has a way of lingering. And, we've all done things that we wish we hadn't.
Regret is a sort of futile emotion to some extent, because there's nothing really truly that I regret as long as I've learned from it. And I have learned. And sometimes I had to go through the cycle again. But I've learned through my experiences, and so they were valuable, they were purposeful, they were meaningful, they were worthwhile, even if they were uncomfortable, even if they were hard, even if they were messy, even if they were painful, they were worthwhile. And I can say that about every relationship. I've had long relationships, 10-year relationships with people, and I don't regret any of them. And that's why I'm able to write with such grace about them in the book, because I can see the value of those experiences with those people. And they all brought beautiful gifts with them, not without a good dose of pain, though.
Yeah.
And
but all that pain is happening for you and through you, right? For your growth and evolution.
For your growth and evolution.
It's a mirror of your own behavior, because, it takes two to contribute to whatever pain moment you're experiencing in a relationship.
Suffering is optional, though. You don't have to hang on to it.
I know. But we live in the world, we're not meditating in caves. You know what I mean?
It's true.
As they say in AA, if you really want to know your character defects, like, get into a relationship, right? Like, it's easy when you're on your own and you think everything's cool.
That's why I love relationships. It's because you learn so much through the relationship. It's very hard to do it by yourself. You don't have any mirror of where your triggers are, where the those nuggets of density that needs healing. You only really see it when you exchange with somebody else.
Yeah. Can we talk about the breast cancer stuff?
Sure can.
So you're taking it on the chin with this book, right? Like, you've been doing press. You tell this whole story around breast cancer and the choices that you made around your own kind of healing process. And I'm sure you knew when you wrote it in the book that when the book came out, you were going to have to kind of answer for that, right? Like, people have sort of come after you for these choices that you've made in your, kind of this exercise of your own sovereignty.
That was surprising, to tell you the truth. I mean, I talked about it in the book. There's a very specific reason that first of all, it's an authentic book. So, like, to cut that part out would not be true. I mean, authentic to me, because it was such a huge turning point in my life. I didn't anticipate that there would be so much blowback on the choice I made, because the chapter is really not about the choice I made. The chapter is about how to make a decision when you're gripped with fear or when you're faced with a life and death situation. Like, how do you figure out what to do when you have no idea of the outcome of your decision either way? So I didn't expect as much blowback. Thank goodness, because I think if I'd anticipated it, I might have written it very differently. I wrote it from the heart and carefully, in the sense that it is not a protocol of how to address illness in a natural way. That's not what this is.
You're sharing your experience.
I'm sharing my experience, and I'm not an
challenge of making that choice that you made. Yeah. But maybe explain to people who don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So in 2017, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It came as a huge shock, because like you, healthy lifestyle, 10 years sober, into wellness. I've started my own wellness business with WellCo a few years earlier, after I'd seen how important nutrition is. It was a crossroad in my own wellness journey that birthed WellCo. And so I have this,
which is like an amazing name, by the way. Just add a W to your name.
It seemed appropriate.
Yeah. No, it's like, it's perfect. Anyway, keep going.
Thank you. So I was diagnosed, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, me, of all people. And what do I do with this information? And how do I address it? And so I went on a journey of research, and I just researched and researched and researched, and I went to see all the best doctors. I spoke to people in Paris, in Israel, in Australia, and, everywhere that specialized in oncology. And I asked them what I should do. And everybody, most of them, had very different responses as to what to do. Okay, you should do radiation, you should do chemotherapy, you should do a mastectomy, a double mastectomy. You don't need to do a mastectomy. You can just do radiation. And, at the end of it, I was just lost. I had no idea. of truly what to do. And I had seen some integrative medicine doctors who said you can do partly this, you can do partly that. And there was no guarantees, no matter what everybody suggested either way, whether it was to take a completely natural route, an integrative approach, or a completely pharmaceutical approach. Nobody had a guarantee that this is going to heal 100% and you're going to come out of this fine. And so I just went into deep meditation, gathered all the information, and then decided that the clearest path for me for the diagnosis that I had for my specific case was to approach it from the least invasive point of view for a period of time and see if that worked. And I was really fortunate because I did that and it did work. And so I continued with that process because I was seeing the results that I wanted, which was absolute wellness.
It was a rigorous process and
Very.
it wasn't overnight. It was pretty prolonged, right? What exactly were you doing?
It was such an intricate protocol, Rich. I mean, it wasn't like, so a lot of people think if you take a natural approach to healing any disease in the sense of it's an imbalance in your body, that you just sort of like drink green juice and pray for the best. And I remember going and seeing the doctor that I had chosen to walk this journey with, and he gave me the list of protocols, and I just burst into tears. I said, I can never do this. It's too much. Like, how am I gonna do all this? And how am I going to do it alone? Because I'm not going to a clinic and, somebody just, you walk along the production line and now you're going to do this and now you're going to do that. I had to find the doctors. I had to be my own sort of master of ceremonies in many ways with all the tools that I had. And I remember him saying to me, because I felt like if I didn't do this 120%, I was going to die. And everyone was going to make fun of me because I didn't do the more traditional, and I say traditional, let's say pharmaceutical route. And he said to me, listen, did I ask you to do it 100%? I said, but I have to do it 100% because I'm going to die if I don't. And he said, just give it your best shot. You give it your best shot. And of course, given the personality that I have, I just worked at it day in, day out for many, many months. And then that went on to many years. So, and it was intricate. I mean, we don't have enough time on this podcast to talk about all the different things I did, but it was a combination of emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental exercises and approaches, put it that way. A lot of detox, a lot of nutrition, fasting, juicing. I mean, the list went on and on and on.
Right. Basically a full-time job, though.
It was.
Yeah. And so the diagnosis is in 2017. And how long before you were in remission?
I don't like to say remission so much because remission sort of implies that there's dormant cancer waiting to come out. And for me, it was like by 8 months in, I had completely clear markers. Actually, before that. But I continued on that protocol for 2 years, just to more than that, 3 years, day in, day out.
Continue to test and make sure.
Well, I was testing more than most people because I didn't have that security of just, we'll wipe it out and you'll be fine. I was testing every 3 months.
So you go in for a lumpectomy to remove a growth, and that's when you get the diagnosis, right? And the diagnosis that you get is for a very specific form of breast cancer called HER2 positive estrogen receptive breast cancer.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
And, I took a look at some of the article. It's not surprising that you were taken aback by, kind of the response to this aspect of your story, but it's also kind of predictable. It's like the press needs a salacious story. This is like the hottest take, right? So they're going to go for this. And I watched the 60 Minutes Australia piece on you.
That was pretty grueling.
It's like, but they have to do their job.
Yeah.
I thought that she handled it responsibly, but also with some grace. I mean, she was not without her compassion. I was expecting her to really go after you.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was balanced in the way that it needed to be for it to be 60 minutes,
Yeah.
I guess I would say.
And I knew that when I was going into it.
But there is this set, like, of course, so like all these, I'm not a medical doctor, hardly,
And nor
let
am I,
alone
by
an
the way.
oncologist, right? So it's like, I have no expertise in this, but I know that, because there's been so much press around this, oncologists have weighed in and, and those opinions vary, but they tend to kind of align with like, she should have done this. I think there's a fear that because, of who you are and kind of your, the platform that you command, et cetera, that this will set in motion like a domino effect, as if you were kind of recommending that people opt out of a traditional protocol and go and do it your way. When I know that your intention was like, I'm trying to explain to you how I make, decisions in my own life, and I'm not telling you what to do or not to do. But like, not all breast cancers are the same.
Right. True.
Is that fair?
Well, I mean, herein lies the dilemma. If, and I'm not an authority on cancer. So I'm an authority on my experience, and I share with you my experience. So, weighing in on sort of what doctors think is specific for this specific type of cancer or how your body responds to it isn't really my skill set. What I do know is that if that is the case, if it's non-invasive and if it is not dangerous, then perhaps the best way of dealing with it isn't wiping out your immune system with chemotherapy.
Right.
And if it is, and there's combination of ways to manage it, then that's also an option. For me, I did 2 lumpectomies. So as far as using modern surgery, I went down that route, and then I just felt that the rest of the process, I would give it a go. My Aussie thing.
Yeah.
I think the way bodies respond to any kind of cancer is, there's no fixed way of dealing with things. In my case, there didn't seem to be a invasive solution that felt right for me.
Mm-hmm. The traditional fear or kind of reaction to this is, well, by doing that, are you not putting yourself in a position where the likelihood, like you said, you didn't like the word remission, but the likelihood of it returning is perhaps increased because you didn't go that traditional route?
Well, I guess I'm living proof to some extent because it's been 7 years or 8 years now. And for me, that is the affirmation that the choice I made for me, for my body, was the one that was right for me at this moment.
Right.
Now, if something, if my body chemistry changes and things change, I'll make a decision based on that. But making a preemptive decision on the future, perhaps, maybe if whatever now isn't really, it doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah. To me, this really isn't about like the choice you made around your own healing.
Right.
The more interesting aspect of this to me is kind of a meta question, which is the tension between, as we were talking about earlier, like the mind and the heart, right? And when do you trust your intuition? And as somebody who was going to go to law school and prided herself on her intellectual capabilities and has had to learn over time how to trust her heart and has been on this journey of knowing, of know thyself, right? Like there's this yin and yang.
Yeah.
Like how do you balance these two when they are at loggerheads with each other, right? Because obviously it's sort of like God delivers you this test case to like see where you're at, and it's like, you don't want to venture down the rabbit hole of pseudoscience and misinformation.
Which I definitely didn't do.
Especially when your life is on the line, right? And yet, as somebody who is committed to their spiritual journey, it is important to weigh like the valence of like your trust in things that you can't control and your level of kind of surrender to that, right?
Yeah.
Like, and this is a war we're all waging on some level, right? Like you're doing it on a kind of conscious level and you're telling this story. And I believe that your motivation and intention for sharing the breast cancer story is a way of like elucidating this theme, right? This tension that we all have within ourselves about like, what's in our best interest? How do we make these decisions? How do I trust my heart when my head is telling me something different? Or how do I exempt myself from the pressures of like external validation? Well, all these experts are saying I should do this, and I want them to think that I'm a good patient or a good student, but my heart is telling me this, or maybe my heart is telling me I should trust these doctors, or how do I weigh all of that? Like, I'm confused. How do I make sense of this? And how do I figure out what's right for me and make that decision not from a place of being reactive, but being informed and like understanding the risks and kind of weighing that tension between like, you know, trust in self and trust in experts and all the like. And I think this is all heightened because the very issue that you're getting at is sort of a culture war issue, right? Like, don't trust experts, trust you, you know, like we need experts. All, you know, like this is like the discourse that's happening on like the whole meta level with respect to everything. And all of it is distilled down into this one story that you tell, which I think makes it dynamite, and why, you know, that's part of why I think the press is fixated on it.
Yeah, you've articulated that so beautifully and that was my experience. And it's really that situation of when the outside world becomes so noisy that it's really difficult to wade through what is the right course of action in any given moment, because we get so distracted and driven by fear, you know. So that's a great, it's sort of like fire when, you know, when you're in fear, it's very difficult to make a decision when you're in fear. And if you've got a lot of people telling you you're going to die, there's no greater fear than that. This was not a flippant decision. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to make an ideological decision that this is what feels right for me, you know, and I'm really into health and well-being naturally. And so,
right,
you know,
I'm just going to, you know, hold my crystal and put it on my yoni and like everything's going to be
and
great.
hope for the best. It wasn't that at all. You know, I took into account everything that everybody was saying. And if there was a unanimous decision that was, if you follow these steps, you will heal, then I'm pretty sure I would have gone down that road, you know, no matter what it was. And I had considered all my options very, very carefully. As you say, that was the catalyst for the biggest change in my life, for the really coming into self in my life.
Explain that a little bit more.
Well, I'd had these opportunities leading up to it. So getting sober, having children, building a wellness business, where there was sort of a lot of noise outside about what I should do, and then finding my own path through those sort of baby steps. And then when it comes to this big, you know, experience that is an analogy for the world, really. It's like, how do you find your truth, what resonates with you in your heart when there is so much noise outside? And that's what it is really about. And there was no bigger noise than the pressure from all these experts. And they are experts, by the way. And there are people that have gone down that road and done really, really well. So I don't think it's an either-or situation. But how do you find what you know, believe is right for you at that given moment, despite all that noise?
Owning your truth and your space, and being able to withstand that when, you know, all these articles are getting written, you know, and stuff's happening. That's one thing. But that's sort of, those are strangers, right?
Yeah.
But you have loved ones and family and two boys, you know, who were concerned about you, and having to kind of stay true to what you felt was right for you amidst, you know, the pressures and the challenges of and the fears of the people that care about you the most.
Well, we all wanted the same thing in the family, is that we wanted me to get well. So like, what was the route to getting well? And there was a difference of opinion along the way. And you're going to, that happens in life. People will have different opinions on what is the best route. And, the kids wanted me to be well, and so did I. And I wanted to make a decision that would be the closest aligned to what I thought would work for me being well. And they trusted my decision in the end.
Is there anything more that you want to say about that maybe you wish, 60 Minutes had asked you, or that you want to correct the record on, or clarify where there might be some confusion out there? I want to give you that opportunity.
Thank you. I think there's a couple of things to be said. Often when we talk about a holistic approach as being sort of just a woo-woo natural approach to things when it comes to medical situations. But for me, a holistic approach is to look at things from an emotional, physical, mental, and a spiritual point of view. I know that they're connected. If the body is showing being unwell or dissonant in illness physically, then it stands to reason that we would also have to look at, okay, where is the dissonance emotionally and spiritually? Because the manifestation is in the body. But the beginning of the dissonance comes from the emotional and spiritual well-being. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to look at all the aspects, not just the physical symptom, but all the other stuff. And all the guilt that I hadn't processed, all the shame that I hadn't processed. And not only that, but, belief systems that I had, fears that I had, that could contribute to me being unwell. In my case, it manifested in cancer, but in other people's case, it could be a myriad of other things. So I really wanted to look at it from a holistic point of view in that sense. And I think there's some misinformation that holistic just means, I'm just going to take natural products.
Right. That you're being very cavalier in the public square. And that has, ramifications, right? But I think...
And that certainly wasn't the case at all.
I mean, I think what can get misinterpreted about what you just shared is this idea that, if you have cancer, it's your fault, it's your behavior. You brought it upon yourself because you didn't heal your emotional wounds or something like that. I think what you're attempting to say, or where your heart is at, is that disease is dis-ease, right? And it is, a byproduct of something in your system that is out of balance, right? And that can be profoundly out of balance, or it can be, subtly out of balance. And nobody is in perfect balance all the time. We're not living in a harmonious state, right? And the choices that we make impact the caliber of that balance. And when those scales are tipped too far in one direction for too long in a chronic context, you are creating an environment where you're vulnerable to some type of, kind of disorder, I guess I would say.
Yeah,
and that can be emotionally, mentally, physically, if you're compromised in some way. And as a result, your immune system is compromised, then you create an environment that's more receptive to something going sideways.
Absolutely. And that's why I chose to look at it from that perspective.
And where are you in that process? Like what still comes up? What's challenging you? What's the next evolution of the spiritual progression and growth? The challenge that is intractable, that, keeps sort of tripping you up when you know it shouldn't?
I think it's that thing of being in the present every now. Taking stock of what's truly going on now and not projecting into the future or living the cellular memory of the past. Mm-hmm. And I find myself triggered by the past at times. That happened before, so I want to mitigate that, or I don't want that to happen again. So, I have to watch out because I need to, that kind of thing. And really, when I'm sitting in the present, in the now, everything is perfect. Everything is exactly the way it's meant to be. There is no, I'll probably go home from this podcast and have that moment that was like, man, I don't know if I did a good job with Rich today. That will come up, I'm pretty sure, at some point. And then I have to immediately readdress that within myself, go, I know that whatever transpired between us was perfect for the listener, for Rich, and for me in that given moment. I know that in my heart of hearts. So don't jump into my automatic conditioning, which is I fucked up, I didn't do a good job, I let myself down, I let Rich down, I let the readers down, I didn't explain myself well, I wish I could have done that again. And it's that conversation that I have with myself often. And the more I do that, the more I reframe those fears or those insecurities or those doubts within myself, the more I do that, I'm creating new pathways where I don't go to that place so much anymore. And that's where the joy is, and that's where the fulfillment is, and that's where the love is in life, that we're not second guessing everything that we do or doubt ourselves.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. You're still a human being. You haven't transcended the mortal coil yet. You're not
clearly,
enlightened.
I haven't transcended. That's why I'm still here.
I'm going to go home and read Be Here Now again. This is the dilemma of being in a human body.
Yeah.
Like if you can transcend like everything that you just shared, like call me and let me know how you did it, because I would like to see how.
Well, if we have transcended, we wouldn't be here in the human form, because that's what we are all here doing.
I know, right? Yes, in this illusion of the self, how can we just enjoy our life and be joyful and serve others with love?
I love that word, enjoy, because I think it should be written enjoy. Enjoy, to be enjoy.
Like INJOY?
Yeah. I'm going to rewrite the language here.
Yes, well, I grant you that power. Well, you can rewrite the language. Well, let's end up with talking a little bit about Wellco. Back where we started. We're doing a circle here. Right. So we started with your entrepreneurial journey, and now we're gonna end with that. So you have this wellness company, and obviously wellness is like the most important thing to you. You live it, you breathe it. And you've taken all of this business acumen and experience and entrepreneurship and put it into this wellness company, which is pretty cool. So what was the idea behind it, and what do you want people to know about it?
It's such a blessing to be able to put your heart into something that really rocks your world. And well-being and wellness has been such a theme in my life through my career and through motherhood. When I turned 50, all the things that I'd been doing, like just the nutritional programs and the exercise program, and everything wasn't working. My body wasn't responding to it, and I was feeling really run down, depleted, coffee addicted, sugar addicted, sleep deprived. My skin changed, my hair changed. I was putting on weight, and I went to the doctor and I said to him, "Listen, I don't even know myself anymore. I don't feel myself anymore. I've got no sense of vitality. I've lost my libido. I don't have my mojo going. What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, you're just turning 50, and that's normal. That's a hormonal change you're going through, and it's just normal." And I thought to myself, how can I support myself through these changes? And, I know that I can't rely on genetics the way I've been able to in the past. I found a fantastic naturopath, and I started working with her. And I said, "Look, I'm taking all these vitamins. Nothing's working." And she said, "Well, the vitamins you're taking are synthetic, so they're not bioavailable. Your body's not recognizing them. To some extent, you're suffering from malnutrition, which is like a bizarre concept in this modern age, that you can be malnourished. But, we're not letting the soils rest like we used to, so you're not getting vitamins and minerals from your vegetables like you were. You need supplementation." And she put me on a program of greens, which I'd never taken greens before. And within about 6 weeks, I saw such a turnaround in my health and well-being, and it compounded over 6 weeks, 12 weeks. And I felt like, my skin got better, my hair got better, and everything, just life improved. And I thought to myself, if I'm feeling like this, there must be other people. And so I wanted to bring this to other people. And that was the foundation. It was a result of my own wellness journey and the willingness and the desire to help people on their journey. And fortunately, I had the business acumen to actually put it into action. But the purpose was to help people find optimum well-being so that they can live their life to the fullest, so that they can bring their unique self into the world with, feeling great and looking great and being fulfilled in life.
It's cool. And so what are the primary kind of products?
We have a super greens, which is called the Super Elixir, which is 50 ingredients, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics, adaptogens. And that was the hero product that I created with the nutritionist and the group of scientists that we worked with. And that's was the foundation of my kind of wellness program, lowered inflammation, because I didn't know about inflammation and cortisol, for example. And so lowering the inflammation in the body, that's the super greens. And then we have a protein powder and a sleep elixir. We have 17 products, but the foundation was a 3-step well program. So greens, protein, and evening elixir for sleep. And that was like this foundation of well-being. And it was simple, it was portable, it was effective, it was quality ingredients, quality combination of ingredients. It is. I don't like to talk about it in past tense. And that's the foundation of the business.
And can you purchase it anywhere in the world? Like, where do you ship worldwide, or?
So we started as an online business. We have 70% online and 30% bricks and mortar. We're an Australian-based company. We ship globally, wellco.com. And you can go on the site and you can see all the different things we have from, hair caps, skin caps, hormonal balancing caps, protein powders, sleep powders. But I really wanted something that was going to be bioavailable. And I loved the idea of powders because I feel that we are, and we still have some caps, but we come from a society where if you're unwell, you take a pill. And I wanted to break that cycle to some extent, that we were offering a nutritional powder that you mix with water that is also hydration, and that we're taking it consciously as a supplement that is to enhance our life rather than taking a pill to deal with symptoms. And that was the foundation of the purpose. And here we are 10 years later doing, wonderfully well. But when I say wonderfully well, not just from a financial point of view, but from the support that we have from our community that take the products and say, I feel so much better. I look so much better. I'm making better decisions for myself because I feel better in my life. I feel a more present parent, capable, energized, happy. And so if people are saying that, then I feel that we're doing a good job.
I think that probably is a good feeling, right?
I think that's what we're all chasing.
On this journey of trying to find a meaning and purpose and fulfillment in life, to be able to serve people in that way.
Service is the most underrated thing. We all think serving or the concept of being helpful or supporting others is a moral obligation. But in fact, we are the ones that benefit from it. And we know that from our experience in AA. It's like, it's what we get from serving others.
Yes. Service is the ultimate selfishness.
True. It's true. That's a good one. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. This was great. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
I thought you were fantastic. And I appreciate you coming and sharing openly and vulnerably. I put you on the spot a few times. You kind of met me admirably in some challenging moments. And I think your message is powerful. I know you've been kind of touring the world with the book, and this is going to continue. And I just encourage you to keep sharing, these stories, because I think they're resonant and important. So thank you for doing that. Everybody can go and pick up the book, Elle. All you have to do is remember the first name or the audiobook, anywhere you get your books, and wellco.com. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're kind of sort of semi on tour with Doyle, right? Like kind of traveling around.
Yeah.
Elle's partner plays guitar for Eric Clapton. So that's very exciting. That's a whole other podcast in and of itself.
That is a whole other podcast. And that's why also the audiobook's so interesting, because he scored the audiobook.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's quite magical. And also it's very lyrical at the beginning and end of each chapters musically, but he's infused it with gongs, all healing frequencies. So gongs, sound bowls, Native American flute, didgeridoo, all the earth instruments.
He can play the didgeridoo? Or he found a didgeridoo player?
He found a didgeridoo player. Yeah. He does the tube and throat singing in it. But yeah,
so it's the circular breathing.
And it's extraordinary. I'd like to be able to play the didge. Can you?
It's pretty cool. No, I don't know.
It's
I can't
such
play
a
anything.
Skill.
play no instrument.
You're playing the world stage with all the beautiful podcasts that you bring.
I have no musical skill. Everyone else in my family is a musician except for me.
You music through your words.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you. And this was just a delight. I appreciate it. Cheers. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed the conversation. To learn more about today's guest, including links and resources related to everything discussed today, visit the episode page at richroll.com, where you can find the entire podcast archive, my books, Finding Ultra, Voicing Change in the Plant Power Way, as well as the Plant Power Meal Planner at meals.richroll.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, the easiest and most impactful thing you can do is to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube, and leave a review and or comment. This show just wouldn't be possible without the help of our amazing sponsors who keep this podcast running wild and free. To check out all their amazing offers, head to richroll.com/sponsors. And sharing the show or your favorite episode with friends or on social media is, of course, awesome and very helpful. And finally, for podcast updates, special offers on books, the meal planner, and other subjects, please subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find on the footer of any page at richroll.com. Today's show was produced and engineered by Jason Camiolo. The video edition of the podcast was created by Blake Curtis with assistance by our creative director, Dan Drake. Portraits by Davey Greenberg, graphic and social media assets courtesy of Daniel Solis. And thank you, Georgia Whaley, for copywriting and website management. And of course, our theme music was created by Tyler Pyatt, Trapper Pyatt, and Harry Mathis. Appreciate the love the support. See you back here soon. Peace. Plants. Namaste.